Morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to everyone, wherever you may be on the land.
So we have one or two more folks connecting to audio, and then we'll get started.
Great.
Yes, so everyone's here gathered today for the Internal Family Systems Befriending a Friend session 4. We have some wonderful speakers lined up today. You see on the screen. But first, we just have some intro slides to show you guys. This session is sponsored by the AT&T, which is a US-based national network. You can see on the map on your screen where all the regions are and where the other AT&Ts are based across the country. And we always like to give a disclaimer that the National American Indian and Alaskan Native Addiction Technology Transfer is supported by a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. And the content of this event is the creation of the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian and Alaskan Native AT&T. We also like to let you guys know that after today's event, you're going to receive a follow-up email, typically within a week. There will be a link to the slides that you're going to see today, as well as the recording, because we are recording. There will be information in the email on how you can request certificates of attendance, and there will be a link to our evaluation survey, which I'll also drop in the chat towards the end of the meeting. And we really appreciate if you fill those out. Helps us know what to improve for next time. And yeah, thank you. We also like to take some time to read this land acknowledgement. I'd like to give everyone just a minute or two to read this. All right, thank you all. And we also like to introduce our circle of voices today. Everyone on the screen played a role in putting together what you're going to see today. We have Dan, Finn, Susan, Julia, and Kiabe. Everyone here has a voice, but Susan will probably be teaching most of the leading, getting us going. And then I'm going to switch over to the other slides real quick.
Thank you, Parker. And I think we're going to have some flute music here while we put our first slide up, just our introductory slide that talks about IFS as a way to learn to love ourselves and each other more. And Keave Bone, who will be joining us in a little bit, will have more to say about that from his tribal perspective. So next slide, please, Parker. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as we're getting ready to introduce ourselves in a couple minutes here, if you want to get pencil and paper while we're getting settled and getting comfortable, you don't have to write today, but if you want to have that handy, that'll be good. We're going to spend just a few minutes with time to write. And if you want to bring the elements in by lighting a candle or your smudge, or, we do consider this a sacred space because we're calling a circle, and we will have our opening prayer after we have a chance to introduce ourselves a little bit in the chat, just while we're gathering and as if we were in person and just telling each other who we are. We'll do that in the chat. So we'll put a few questions up that you might want to put into the chat, and then we'll read some of them depending on how many people we have here today. So let's see. Might want to bring in some water, and just get yourself comfortable. And then next slide, please, Parker. So this is what, if you want to put it in the chat, are some suggestions for introducing yourself. Just where are you in from? And, you know, this could be a place, it could be, I am from the people of the big voice, or I am from the people of the fire, however you want to express where you're in from, who your ancestors are, possibly. And then, because we're a group learning a healing modality, if you want to say what kind of indigenous or culturally informed healing practice you use, or what kind of Indian ceremonies, therapies that you draw upon in your work, that'd be great. And what do you call that modality of healing work that you do? If you feel that you want to put that in as part of your introduction. And then also it might be just good to know how familiar you are with IFS as we open into some conversation later. So if you've got those things in the chat, I'm going to get my chat up, and Julia, maybe you can read some of them as they come in. I'll start with one or two. I'll start with myself. I am in from the Great Lakes area, and I am a Gadua or Cherokee descendant. And I use indigenous teachings when I work with indigenous peoples, or anyone who is interested. I find out what their cultural background is, what they know or what they don't know, and try to, well, not try to, I do draw on that in working with them, and encourage people to really embrace more deeply their own practices and find their own community healers, or healers that feel comfortable to them. I draw a lot on the elements, the directions. And then, of course, I'm an IFS therapist and have been, it seems like forever, for going on 30 years. Let's see. And so I'm very familiar with IFS. So, oops, I've lost some that's in the chat here. I saw, Julia, your introduction a ways back. So if you want to say who you are and then maybe read some of them, please.
Okay, my feet touched the ground today in Los Gatos, California, the traditional lands of the Muwekma Ohlone. I am a Ralamuli descendant. I am the daughter of Ray and Hilda, and the granddaughter of Julia, John, Thomas, and Juanita. We also have joining us today Michelle Miller of the Hualapai tribe, people of the Tall Pines, Mike Bricker from Oregon, who is joining today from the NRI ADA conference in Wisconsin. And we also have greetings, Leos Enchim Hyokoi, greetings and Creator bless you all. Pascuayaki tribe of Arizona, supportive employment program. That's Felipe Flores. Deborah is a social worker who works with veterans and those who are Native American or First Nations. And she also asked them about their tribe culture and language.
So let's just scroll and read to ourselves for a bit. I will say that I'm happy to see you, Alberta, from the Navajo Nation. Welcome.
I'm noticing someone from the native village of Koyukuk, Alaska, on the Koyukuk and Yukon rivers, who works for the Fairbanks Native Association as a program manager doing Bridges to Recovery. And my husband, Chris, and I are currently working with the Inupiaq people on the North Slope of Alaska doing a 12-step program. So we meet weekly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cross-tribal representation from many lands, many backgrounds, many states.
Thank you, Julia. And next slide, please. So we are going to talk about parts a lot today, and how our parts interact within us and with others. So how do we gain awareness of a part? How do we know when a part wants our attention or is around? And these are the main ways that we know that a part wants us to understand what its role is, what it's doing, how it's serving, what it brings to the community. Our parts come to us in dreams. They come to us in body sensations. We feel the energy of them moving through our body or in one place in our body, or giving us a sensation of a warning like nausea, or of a wonderful feeling when we're in a place that we love. Our parts speak to us. Sometimes we can actually hear their voices in our own language. Sometimes we hear them with someone else's accent. Sometimes the voice is not in like English or Ojibwe, but in a language that we understand in the inner world that we might not understand so much in the outer world. And as I mentioned, it's the energy of the parts often that let us know that we need to pay attention to that part. And in IFS, we believe that all parts have positive intention, even if they are running our lives amok because they get in the driver's seat and they drive us into addictive behaviors, or behaviors that don't represent the truth well. We believe that they have a positive intention, that they learned these, what we'll call negative behaviors, somewhere along the line as a way to protect the inner community, as a way to protect the person. And that our work as IFS therapists is to listen to them and to their stories. IFS is very much a storytelling culture. And we listen with compassion and hear the stories and hear and understand. All of our parts need our understanding about how they decided to get in the driver's seat with negative behaviors. And in that way, then we can dialogue with them or work with them, have energy exchanges with them, so that most often when they know that the self or the soul is having that dialogue, that communication with them, they are more than happy to update their strategies of how they drive, and to allow the self to really lead. The self is different from these parts, and the natural and sovereign leader of a person's system, personality system. Okay, next slide, please, Parker. And in IFS, and we could spend the whole time on this, but I'm just going to touch on it. We have seen that there are three main types of parts, and I put the sun or the light in the middle there to represent the self, because the self, as I mentioned, is a different kind of a part, or not a part in the sense that we're speaking of parts or subpersonalities or alters. That the self is an entity, a sovereign being, entity, many ways to describe it by itself. And there are those who say from many cultures that if we're talking about the self and describing it, we're not really describing it, because it can't be put into words. But the parts, these three major types of parts, as IFS sees the inner world, are managers, firefighters, and exiles. Our exiles are usually our vulnerable, young parts who bring great resources to our inner system. They bring our talents, our gifts, our joy for life. And it's just the way life works, that as those exiles begin to move through the family, the community on Mother Earth, they absorb burdens. Those burdens may come from uh, things that have befallen the land, things that have befallen the land. Those burdens may be absorbed from people who have experienced some kind of trauma or historical trauma and ancestral trauma and are still carrying that spirit trauma. So when we're young and vulnerable, we absorb these, what IFS calls burdens, before we are even aware of it. And so we have what we call a protective layer. Other psychologies call it a defense layer. There are other ways to describe it, but in IFS, the protectors are the managers and the firefighters. So what are they protecting? They're protecting us in a nutshell from feeling the pain that the exiles have absorbed. And these managers and firefighters are the ones who usually take on the strategies that lead us into the negative behavior, such as extreme use from extreme use of substance that leads into dangerous addictive behaviors. That's just one example of a strategy so that we don't have to feel the pain that we took on when we were younger, when we were experiencing abuse or neglect, or we had some just scary experience with a wild animal and maybe there wasn't anyone there to help us understand about that. So the managers and the firefighters have two distinct ways of operating in the inner system and in the world. The managers are socially inclined. They want us to fit well into the community. So they do things that are community acceptable, family acceptable, socially acceptable. The firefighters don't care about that. The firefighters are just desperate. They will put out the fire of pain, and they'll do it in any way that they can, and they'll do it in the moment. They don't think about it. They're not the planners that the managers usually are. So before we leave this topic of the three types of parts, Julia, is there anything else you'd like to say about this in IFS?
Only thing I would say is to give a couple more examples about what do you mean, like managers and what are the ways they usually manifest. Managers usually, when they're in extreme mode, they're the perfectionists, they're the planners, they're the overschedulers, overdoers. They'll just really try to make everything right, not only within your own world, but in everybody's world out there. And they're the ones that are just working themselves and you to exhaustion and trying to get others to do that as well. Because why? They're trying to, again, prevent something bad from happening. And they believe that if they don't do all these really controlling things, that everything's going to get out of control and be a disaster. The firefighters realize it's all a disaster already. So I need to drink, use, eat, escape, rage, act out in some way to express the frustration of the managers failing at their job to make everything perfect. So that I just would want to explain them. And then the exiles are the ones who are kind of in the fetal position, hiding. Sometimes they're exiles that we're ashamed of. They're carrying shame. They're the things that we just don't want anybody to see. So
thank you, Julia. And so, yeah, I talked about the exiles absorbing burdens. Well, the managers and firefighters, every part in the system absorbs burdens. And I'd like to just say a word in particular about the what we call internalized oppression in psychology. And that is that these parts of us, all types of them, are the patriarchal mirror of the colonizers is what sets the pattern for any managers or firefighters who have been westernized. And so when we look at this oppression that was absorbed by our ancestors, whether they were involved in doing the oppression or as being oppressed, this stuff is what informs. This is the data that informs our managers, our protective layer on how to protect ourselves. So in absorbing that data, we become burdened ourselves. And if there is a dominant culture that is forcibly stealing land, killing people, erasing language and culture, that is the imprint. That is how the managers then begin to believe things should be done. So these burdens come to us through no fault of our own. We simply are there with a person or place or thing that causes an experience, and then cause the managers, firefighters to believe that they ought to act in certain ways in order to manage a life, to fit in. So maybe we could take a moment here and just have 2 or 3 people, if you want to, offer how that might have happened in the assimilation process, the forced assimilation process, that our inner parts had to absorb certain ways of being that don't work and that we are in the process of reclaiming, recovering the ways that are more in line with the teachings that we were given, with original teachings. Does anybody, let's just finish with this slide, please, Parker, and just have gallery view here for a minute. Whoops, well, can we come back to that slide next after? Yeah, just take all the slides down and so we can see each other, please. Yes, thank you, Parker. There we go. Okay, does anyone have any comment on, is this making sense, or any examples of how we absorbed, our protective layer especially absorbed these patterns and templates of burdened ways of fitting in to our families and communities?
Deborah mentioned the Indian boarding schools. Deborah, would you like to comment on that?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I really don't know much about it, but in my undergrad years, I studied Native American literature, and I learned a lot about Native Americans and what they went through. And it's a horrible, horrible story. So I remember children being taken away from their parents and being sent far away from their tribe, and their hair was cut and they were made to wear white clothing, as you will, and they were not allowed to speak their native language, and on and on and on. It was a horrible, horrible abusive situation.
Thank you, Deborah. And that is one a primary way that these things are learned. We say that hurt people because we hurt other people to protect our exiles, to protect the vulnerable parts of us. We bully other people to do that because we were bullied. We parent the way we were parented. And if we had to go to a place of torture where we were ripped away from our families and treated cruelly, then some of our parts develop ways that might feel hateful. Not all of our parts, not everybody acts on these things, but they burden our parts. Thank you, that was a good example. Any others? while I'm waiting, or we're waiting for somebody to maybe come, and I want to welcome Keawe Bone, who will be saying a few words here about connections and connections with parts when we're complete with this, with some comments. Welcome, Keawe.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Glad you're here. So is this making sense, or any other examples about how we internalize oppression or burdens? And you all are probably familiar with how we carry this epigenetically and in spirit memory, as well as physical memory.
Susan, do you mind if I speak a little bit on this?
Well, why don't we just move right into what you came prepared? Thank you, Keawe.
Oh, well, and I did want to add one thing to what you were saying that kind of occurred to me, and that I was just having a back and forth with my lady. There's secondary trauma that comes from, the things that we never asked for, and the realities we're living today, of putting that burden onto another race, or another archetype that we don't want that shame to come from, and it's none of the oppressors that are doing these things nowadays, but there's this active, alive belief that those things are still, well, it feels the feeling of those things still actively going on without the presence of them being here, causes a little bit of disconnect and some issues within, especially indigenous populations and marginalized communities, of past traumas that may not have, a heal or a cure for. Those narratives are still happening within us and within our circles and within our parts of how we identify and what we came from, or what our ancestors came from, and who we are today. It's a very difficult type of understanding to come into a world that maybe that stuff isn't you, but you are secondarily linked to those traumas that have happened to your family members or your ancestry or your line, and what does that make you when you come out of these types of situations, and it's what the generation before you was raised with, and how you were raised. And even though you might not have felt that trauma, individually, those traumas that are in line with those historical traumas, that you are still feeling secondary effects of epigenetics, if you will, like you said. Your environment has been created for you, and you're learning from that environment from day one.
Yes, thank you, Keawe. Every one of us could fill in details on this topic that we were just touching on here this morning. And ancestral trauma, historical trauma, collective trauma, the narratives that become burdened, and that's right, that we believe them, or parts of us believe them. Thank you for filling that piece about vicarious or secondary trauma in for us.
Yeah.
And did you want to go on with what you were prepared to teach?
Sure. If you're okay with that.
Yes, well, please.
So I had sent some slides, but I'm not sure if they're particularly important to do anything with. But so I wanted to talk about what had happened for when I was, I'm new to IFS, of course, and Susan graciously let me, come in and put my piece of a cultural view upon what's happening with IFS and and how I guess view the lens in which the world that I live in from my indigenous perspective and upbringing within IFS. And it reminded me of I've had mentors, teach me as I'm growing, and I'm 34 now. But I remember some hard lessons that I had to learn. And one of these lessons I reflected on while I was listening to some IFS material. And it was that the two laws of being human. And the first one, the first law of being human or being a human is that you take care of the things with names. And the second law is that if it doesn't have a name, then you give it a name, which in my idea is the two things that humans are supposed to be doing here, on this earth, which is taking care of things with names. And if it doesn't have one, you give it one. And if you've given it a name, then you have assumed responsibility over this living thing. But as I was looking at the IFS material, it went a bit deeper than that. It was that we give names to things that are not animate or that are not things like objects. We give those names to things with a myriad of different arrays of imagination, like depression, suicidality, love, appreciation, family, all of these things that are categorized with names have a familiar understanding of what we have a frame of reference upon, because we are taught those things and they're given names. We may not have given them ourselves. And sometimes we may, acquire the labels and put them on things that we like, such as monogamous or non-monogamous or whatever it may be. That is from that moment of inception, your duty and right to take care of. And in that thought, I just thought, whoa, this is massive. The reciprocal relationships that we are supposed to be mindful of, taking part in, being stewards or having a stewardship of the land or of ourselves. There is a relationship in between all of those names that we acquire and that we place upon things or ideas, that there is this, I would like to look, I like to think of it as magic in between. There's this magical process in between those things. When I am introduced, I may be introduced as, like if I say, Ke ave koshedzi bon dakwadon, I am a people, I'm from the people of the Center Township Fire. I come from the Eastern Band Cherokee Indians. I work at the hospital. I do all these things, but it is a relationship to the name in which I carry. And I must act accordingly to those particular frames or those viewpoints. Because if I am not taking care of those types of relationships or the things in between, then I am not acknowledging my whole self. And I am not acknowledging the individual parts of what that is, because I may be a father and I may be a significant other. I may be a community member and I may be an enemy. I may be, an obstacle. But if I'm not doing those things, then I carry something else. And that is what was told to me with the two laws, that you take care of the things with names and you give names to the things that don't have names. But if you are not doing those two things in order to be human, then you are now participating as something else. And you are creating disharmony and dysfunction within the world, at least the world that you live in. And I know that we have names for things like addiction. And in addiction, I don't know if we could classify taking care of something if we're doing harm. We could classify it as that. But if we are creating disharmony, we are certainly not participating in the first two laws of being human. And if we are practicing as something that is inhuman and we don't have a name for it, where's the responsibility and the actions in between? And what are we doing while we are participating as a non-human? And those are, I think that without my slides, I think that's where my mind goes, and I don't want to get too far out of the rabbit hole. Susan.
Well, Keave, thank you so much. And thank you, Julia, for putting a lot of the main points in the chat. And Keave, well, what we're doing here is looking at IFS through an Indigenous lens. And this is the first, as far as I'm aware, of such a circle here online. And we're just at a beginning. And we're beginning with these different perspectives that we've had over the months here in these webinars of bridging what the culture, if you will, that the language that IFS brings, and the cultures and languages of Indigenous peoples, and just trying to understand where is the healing in all of this. So one thing that I'd like to say about your comments, Keave, is that we in IFS who are more familiar with Indigenous ways are likely to refer to the self as the self in relationship, and in that relationship with everything. Everything, other than, I'm not going to try to answer your question about what happens when we go into these spaces that seem inhuman, except to say that in this model, we do work with beings that others may not consider human. And we work with them to help them know where is their place in the system, and for the self to be the one that takes care of the system, so that if there is harm to be done, it can't be done within that system. And we relate with things that have names like depression and parts that carry depression, to hear the story of the depression, to be with, to companion, to offer compassionate witness and respect for how that depression got to be. This is a lot to get into, but it is exactly what the self in relationship with all that is, we believe, is capable of. So thank you so much for the depth of your considerations and sharing your cultural and personal lenses as you are new to IFS. This is what we are gathering here for. And the way that Keave got in on this was Steve, who Parker is graciously subbing for Steve here again today. And we so appreciate that. Steve used some word in Lakota. And I said, oh, Steve, that's great. And Dan Foster was with us in this planning meeting. I said, oh, I'd love to just understand that in a Cherokee, a Salagi word. So Steve said, oh, just a minute, let me call up Keave. And that is how Keave became part of our planning team and part of our teaching team. So thank you. And I'd like to ask us all to hold in our heart minds what our parts may be saying right now or urging us, and what's coming up or what's triggered or what's inspiring us, so that we do have time to get to this IFS demonstration that we have been working toward over the last 3 webinars, and now we're going to be getting to today. And so as we're going to have a couple ways of preparing more for that demonstration that Julia and I are going to provide today. One of them is through some writing, and then we'll have a meditation. Neither one are going to take a whole lot of time. So if you'd like to pull your writing materials together while you're holding comments, thoughts, questions in your heart mind, Parker will put up a slide that is just suggestions for writing. You may have something that you want to write about, or you may wish to just reflect and be with some of the things that you're hearing, or something that's going on in your world this morning. But you're invited to use these writing prompts, and we'll spend 7 minutes. Julia, will you clock us once we get started on this for 7 minutes, please? And Parker, that would be slide number, after that one. Oh, wait, we forgot to do the 6 Fs. I forgot to do the 6 Fs. And this is, we will do the writing after this. You think that'll work? Julia, am I in line here? I don't know what I do without Julia, because even though I have an outline, I forget stuff. So please bear with me. Thank you. This is a piece that was published in 2014 in the Journal of Indigenous Research about befriending parts, and that everyone has a self. And it's the 6 Fs actually of IFS, the 6 ways of befriending a part. Only back in 2014, it seemed more important to add another one in, so that it wasn't exactly 6. And that one is the one, find culturally derived words for self. Because some of us were really looking at how IFS and indigenous cultures overlap and work hand in hand with each other. So if there's no safety in the 2 systems where 2 people are using the IFS model, then IFS won't work. This protocol, this procedure, this model won't work. There has to be enough safety for both the person who's helping and the person who is receiving. So what we do when we sit down together is begin to build that trust, that safety. And so the person who's coming for help feels safe enough to do that, to show up. And then as it unfolds, we focus on however a part might make itself known. And I'm just going to start there in the north, and I'm going to go counterclockwise around this circle here, this diagram. So we looked at that earlier, that a part might make itself known through a dream or our body, a felt sense, through that parts talk we call the inner dialogue. And that's a place where we can begin to get into our own and another person's inner world of parts. And this is really about reaching into each other's heart to heart, or it won't work. As I was saying, we got to have that safety of being heart to heart connected. So then another way is to find the part in or around the body. And as we're sitting together, we might feel, oh gosh, I'm wringing my hands, or gee, I'm a little NQR, not quite right. Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe I feel a little dizzy, or if I'm coming for help. And then, of course, that culturally derived words for self, we can just ask about that, or in the conversation that we get into, we can listen, and maybe the person that we're working with will just say the word that they use for self. BIM likes to use the word center. So when I'm talking with BIM or working with BIM, I'll often just shift and use the word center instead of self. Then finding out about the fears of the part is a big part of creating that safety and befriending a part. And of course, if we've got fears that will be overexposed or things won't be confidential or we're not going to talk about it. So sometimes that comes later when we're asking, well, about the fears, or just in conversation, the fear might get spoken about. But it's really important to respect the fears of a part. And this is often fears of a manager, that a manager part fears that if they talk too much about their illegal activities, that they're going to get ratted on. If they talk too much about the ways that they feel incompetent or have done something that they feel is really bad, they're going to lose their job. Those kinds of fears, or fears that they're basically not worthy. Those are the kind of bottom line fears that come out in different ways that we hear them, that we're trained to hear them. So we have to create that trust and safety around what might happen around those fears. So befriending the part, one thing is, and it's hard to do it online, but noticing proximity. How close does a person feel to their own part? And as we introduce the part's language, as we go with a person into what do you see about that part? What do you feel in your body? If that part were right here speaking to you, we might ask, are you able to reach out and touch it? And if they're just at a comfortable touching range, often when I ask that, then the person's part will come closer and want to hold their hand or sit on their lap or hug the person, maybe act like the younger part that they are. And that really shows the befriending, that trust is beginning to happen. Or sometimes it's the other way around. A part is so internal that we need to ask the part if it feels safe enough to actually come out in front of the person we're working with. And so we say something like, well, is that part that's in the pit of your stomach and is telling you that it's carrying something that it inherited from another lifetime, from one of your ancestors, is that part feeling okay enough to come out in front of you and get into communication that way? Because some parts can be so blended, as we say, or flood our system, that with that flooding going on, it's pretty hard to get into a dialogue with the part. And I don't know if that's making sense and working in the inner world, but we can come back to some questions about it later. And then moving around this circle to find out about what the part wants the self to know about. This is just critical because all parts need and want three things that we ultimately help the person's self to provide for the part. This is not about the therapist or the healer providing it, although we do, and that helps. What's really important is that our own self, or the person we're working with self, gives respect, appreciation, and understanding. Those three things every part needs: respect, appreciation, and understanding. So one of the F's in befriending a part is to find out what that part wants the self, the sovereign self, to know about, or the soul to know about. And that usually involves the story of what happened to that part, the story of what traumatized that part, the story of how the trauma impacted the part. And sometimes a whole life is shaped around that trauma and the impact of that trauma. And there are many parts that want their stories to be known by the self, be understood, and to be received with compassion. That's where the healing lies. That's where the transformation arises from. And then finding out how the inner system feels toward the part, because we're dealing with a system, a community. Our inner relatives in there have the same relational life as we do in our families and external communities and nations. Okay, so that,
Susan,
yes, Julia.
Susan, now that you've completed this slide, I know that we were going to go into the journaling portion right now and then the demo. And I'd
Yes.
like to, in this very moment, flip those and have us do the demo first, because I think the demo may activate some parts in people that they can then write about. Because I'm just sensing in questions in the chat, they want to see what's done with clients. And so maybe letting them see the demo and then writing about their parts that might have come up during the demo.
Yeah, Julia, thank you. And because I'm not seeing the chat as I'm speaking, I think that people who can do all that at one time are like a different kind of human than I am, because I can't do it. So thank you.
Yeah, we just got a thumbs up on that, on going straight to the demo. So thank you, Genoa.
Great. All right, so let's just do a brief meditation to get ready then. Parker, if you want to take this slide down, and we'll just have our gallery view here for until we do the meditation. Then we'll go into the speaker view. But for now, if you want, if you're more comfortable turning off your video, that's fine. We'll just have a short going inside so that we can be aware of our parts and what's up. And that way maybe we can lean into the demo a little bit more with our own issues, with our own compassionate witness for what's up for us, as well as what might be up for Julia or for me, as I take the role of therapist. Sometimes that's what comes up too. So, okay, let's get comfortable and get ready to go inside, as we say in IFS. And maybe a breath or two as we're getting comfortable, and remembering that our breath is a gift of our ancestors, a continuity, a connection with our ancestors. With the elements. As we get comfortable in our place, wherever we're touching, where gravity has us, that pull toward our Mother Earth, and knowing and understanding ourselves as part of the earth. And that our bodies are of the earth. And I just invite you to do a brief body scan. And if that's not what is calling to you, if something else is calling to you, please go with that. But I'm inviting all of us to just pay attention to what we sense or feel in any part of our body or in our whole body at one time. And as we become aware of what might be large, or what might be a small sensation, and notice it and give a nod so that it knows that we notice it. Or it might be something wide and easy to sense, or it might be a narrowness just in one part or one side of our body. Just notice and give that nod. And maybe there's something that one or more part wants you to know. Maybe it actually can be heard in a language. Or maybe it can be heard in the language of color or temperature. Or of a, or just a feeling like thirst or a sense of satisfaction. And then I'm inviting you to, out of all of the sensations in your body that you might have noticed, see if there's one that seems to want your attention the most. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And if there is, to offer that place, maybe it's a part, more space. We have the capacity to offer our parts spaciousness because that's who we are, part of who we are, one aspect of who we are. So offer that place, if you like, more space, just create it for that part. And if in two-way connection you notice that the part likes it or thrives with it, open it more, offer more spaciousness. And keep offering and noticing, and I will offer about 1 minute of silence and then I'll call us back. So I'm inviting you to thank all of your parts or anything that you were aware of during our time inside, and to slowly bring yourself back to our circle. So, Julia, do you need to take a little break, or are you ready for our demo?
I'm ready, but before we go into the demo, something just came to me right this second. And what I'd like to suggest that the participants do during the demo is take the piece of paper in front of you and draw a line down the middle of it. And on one side, write down the parts in Julia that you're hearing. Because I'm a person with a complex system and you're probably going to hear a bunch of parts. So like you might hear rage, the workaholic, the people pleaser, the perfectionist, the whatever. So just all those parts that might show up today. And on the other side of the page, the right side of the page, what are the parts that are coming up in you? So Julia's parts on one side, your own parts on the other. And then maybe we could do a chatterfall after.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julia. And I'd like to take that a step further in just preparing for this demo. In IFS, we have what we call therapist parts. And so if you notice that, I'm getting into therapist parts, and those would be parts that might have an agenda that is mine and that I'm not really just opening space for the person I'm working with. Or those might be parts of me that are afraid of something. And so I cut off the flow and I don't really listen to Julia. Then we're not going to count that I am aware that we're doing this online, and that we have a limited amount of time together. So I will cut it off at a certain point. But I mean therapist parts that just don't listen are the kind, and you can put that in the side, and if parts of you that are noticing therapist parts that are different from myself, because my role here is to be in, we say it like this, we say be in self, or to access enough self energy. And I don't have to be perfect for this to feel safe enough. I just have to have enough self so that Julia and I both trust the process. Okay, enough said about therapist parts. So what the other thing to prepare is just to open your own compassionate witness. And that is your role, as to offer that compassion to both of us as we are doing this IFS work. All right. So Julia and I know each other. We are sisters, chosen sisters, but we have never met each other in person. It's through the IFS work that we know each other, and we've shared a lot of our own parts in a weekly meeting that we might talk about later. That's an IFS meeting where we talk about our parts and our process. So Julia, is there anything that you would like to say to segue us into the work with parts, like about the part that you might be working with, or what?
Yeah. So first of all, I already got my Kleenex. So, and I'm really glad that I am
Not mine.
I'm feeling the safety of the group, that like if I cry and I need to grab a few of those across the way, that like no one's gonna like freak out who's watching. And I also trust you, Suzan, that if I have to cry and weep, that you're not going to be afraid or shame me for that, for being too emotional, and the other thing that I want to say is, getting ready for this, I was feeling very, very vulnerable, because this is the first time that I'm doing a video where A, I don't know all the people, B, the recording is going out to what I would call the public. So it's not like a closed circle of 24 people in a training, and that's the only people who are going to see the video. There are already over 300 people that have registered for this webinar who have access to the recording, and I don't even know who they are. And so it feels like really putting myself out there, which made me feel very vulnerable. And at the same time, what I realized is that I care so much about healing, and healing the people, and putting this in the hands of the people directly, that I told all those parts that were going, your stuff is going to be all hanging out there for everybody. It's like, yeah, and that's okay. And that's okay. So I was able to, I've already kind of calmed my system that was feeling a little, not a little, maybe feeling a lot anxious about,
Okay, well, Julia,
this.
thank you for sharing that. And thank you for those parts that care so much that you're willing to have the courage to do this. And yes, this is being recorded, but it takes a while to get the recording to a place, as you know, to publish it. And if you are not comfortable with that, it will go no further.
Okay.
We do not have to put this up on the ATTC website. So we'll
Yeah.
check in with you afterwards, or maybe, I don't know how long it takes to put it up there. I think it takes a while, but we will definitely check with you and with me. Maybe I won't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. Okay. That helps. I think the other thing that was coming up for me getting ready for this is that my parents, who I love so deeply, they both transitioned to the other side already. And we've done healing work in dreams. So what was making me, one of the things that was making me most vulnerable was if any members of my family or my extended family ever saw this, that they would shame me if anything I said reflected negatively on my parents, which is not what I'm trying to do. And there was a certain amount of trauma that came through my parents from the trauma that they experienced coming up. So there was violence, there was internalized violence that I've heaped upon myself, addiction, alcoholism, when I came into the rooms of recovery 26 years ago, I say that, I was a periodic binge drinker. I didn't want to drink every day, but I wanted to kill myself every day.
Julia, I'm going to come in here for just a minute.
Mhm.
I hear these protective parts that don't want your family, any family members, to hear you say anything about other family members who have gone on. And that's just, I respect that. And that's another reason why, if you don't want this broadcast, you don't have to. And I just want to
Yeah.
sure those parts doing their job of protecting your family, that that we hear them, we know they're there.
Yeah, I think what I want to do, and what I did before we started, was call in my ancestors, including my parents, and I want to feel them. I want to feel them in their self, in their wholeness, saying it's okay to talk about this, because we know that this can help others. It's almost like by revealing our darkness, we can bring light. And so they're knowing how much I love them, and how much I appreciate them, and how much I know that they were acting from their trauma as they related to me at times. Um, and that, and I guess what I'm sensing as I'm hearing even them here is that they're going, we're so glad that we've healed. But that happened after they've completed this life. It happened through dreams, but those dreams were real. You know what I'm saying? It's like, they weren't dreams. They were us communicating during dreams.
I do know what you're saying.
So I just want to say that. So because the part that I thought I was going to work on today, Suzan, it was my workaholic part. And when we were in the meditation, I've been called on, due to people in our IFS community that meets on Sunday. I was sent literature related to Workaholics Anonymous, because I have been working myself through the night, for example, in a 10-day stint, I would sleep 5 hours, collectively 5 hours. And just press myself forward. And then, after that was all over, someone would say, I would be on some meeting, and, I had Pete, who Pete is, say, hey, Julia, can you email? And he didn't even finish his sentence. And I'm going, no, I can't email one more person. I'm crying, Kleenexes. I'm going, Pete, do you know how tired I am? Do you know how I can't? no, I won't, because it's not just one email. They're gonna have to email me back, and they're gonna have to email those people, and I went through this big rant, right? So there were people that heard me do that, I guess, heard me talk about that, who said, Julia, we think you need this literature, right? So I've been reading it, and it's been showing me my addiction to adrenaline and my process addiction to overscheduling and overdoing. In the meditation today, you know, I've been wanting to get to know the part that is addicted to adrenaline and overschedules and overdoes, and sleep is optional. You know, just let's live on adrenaline. It's a lot more efficient to live off adrenaline rather than sleep. So what came up for me in the meditation was this rage that felt like it was rooted in the earth, like it was coming out of the earth. And it was this rage for all the oppression and the erasure and the exploitation and the violence and the taking and all of that. That's what I'm fighting against. And there's a lot of work to be. It's almost like my workaholic part was saying, yeah, that's what we're fighting against. So let's, you know, F and get busy because, you know, I mean, it was like, I don't know, being slow and planful and doing some freaking schedule and not taking on too much, you know. I mean, it's like I have this part that judges all that.
Is it a good time to just take a pause here?
Yeah.
Yes, and exhale in whatever form. And I'm going to say what parts I'm aware of so that you can get a little clearer maybe on what you're communicating here. One is I heard about this protector that comes up belatedly after days of sleep deprivation and then protects you by yelling at people or being curt, to say the least.
Yeah.
So there's that one. And then one that you say is addicted to adrenaline. Yeah. And then the sleep deprivation, I'm not quite sure how that works with parts yet. And also then one that is aware of that it's fighting rage that is rooted in the earth. So am I hearing clearly and accurately?
Yeah.
Okay. So of those parts, is there more that want to join them, or is there one of those that's calling to you to be with now, or to stay with all of them as a group?
The rage feels too big. The rage feels like it's like it feels like, I don't know, like a granite mountain in the earth that goes into the earth. It's like that. Then it's a volcano.
Okay.
But it feels too big. It's almost like the part that feels like, yeah, that's why I got to work so hard. That part is feeling so exhausted that part just wants some compassion and some attention and some chance to speak, because that's the part that I have not allowed to speak.
Okay. All right. So this part that fears what would happen with that rage has your attention.
Yeah.
Does it know that you're paying attention to it?
Now it does. And it feels really thankful.
Okay.
And okay. I'm going to close my eyes too, because I always do better work when my eyes are closed. So
Sure.
uh, the rage that felt so big is, it feels like it's softening, um, because I spoke for it, and it feels like it's still there. It doesn't want to go away because it thinks like it deserves to be enraged. It deserves to be alive. And there's a lot to be enraged about. And so it's going like kind of like, you can judge me if you want, but it ain't going to make me go away, kind of thing. But it also realized that to be so huge and so terrifying is too much. And so it's going, okay, I'll dial down a little bit. And then so it's dialing down, and my other parts are saying, thank you, because we love you. I guess that's what, wow. My other parts are saying, and we're with you. And the integrity of the rage, the other parts see the integrity of the rage and says, thank you for having that integrity that has the rage that you feel. And they're also saying, and thank you for easing a bit so that we also have voices around the table. They want rage to have a voice at the table, but they want there to be a table that they all can sit at.
Okay. So does the rage know that you are here and aware of this conversation and aware of it?
Yeah, the rage senses myself, and the rage was saying something like, but I'm a bigger badass than you are, That's what the rage was saying to myself.
How do you respond to that?
Myself laughed. Myself just said, myself kind of knows there's no contest. Like, we're not trying to have a biggest badass contest here, So myself just laughed because, and like kind of said, hey, you can, like, it's almost like you want to be the queen of rage, man, do it. It's like you can do that, so it's like my rage in seeing that my rage didn't make myself afraid. It made the other parts afraid, but myself was just going, man, I love you. I think you have great integrity and you fuel a lot of activity in the world. So, hey,
so how
like
does
go you. So
how does the part carrying the rage feel about your hey man and kind of laughing a little bit and saying it's okay?
Yeah, it's why the rage can ease. The rage can it's like, it's definitely a fire. It's a fire.
Okay.
It says I'm gonna still be burning, but I don't have to, I don't have to be a destructive fire. I can be a fire that fuels.
Okay.
And doesn't destroy.
Okay. Ask the fire who it believes you to be.
the fire is saying that it had never seen myself before, that it had only seen all the parts that it was torching. I mean, like the workaholic,
Mhm.
the perfectionist, the step up, don't whine, don't complain. I mean,
Mhm.
the inner critic, so that all the rage saw before was all those parts. And the rage just was going, man, I'm here because I got to get this army of parts like off their asses, and let's get busy, man. Don't you see all this, that needs to get done in the world?
Got to build a fire with them too, a kind of a
Yeah.
wildfire system here.
Yeah. Wanted to get everybody on fire, so everybody's
Right. Fire up. Yeah. So now who does the part carrying this fire or the fire, what does it see in you? Who does it believe you to be, and what are you like in its perspective?
wow. As the fire looks at myself, I had another part who constantly feels invisible.
Mm.
That was feeling that despair of like what it always feels about being unseen.
Mhm.
And so when the fire looked at myself, that it was like that unseen part was going almost like kind of codependent on the self, going, ooh, I know what it feels like to be unseen, self,
Mm.
I'm always invisible. Or if I'm seen, because I'm the only person of color, only woman in this room of white, powerful, rich men, I mean, privilege, name it. I'm either not seen, or if I'm seen, it's like that Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. Let's target.
Okay, so do the fire and the invisible part, the fire part and the invisible part, how well do they know each other?
They don't know each other at all.
Okay.
They The invisible part feels so invisible. I mean, it just feels like nobody, oh, well, not nobody, like I'd say the people that are in the most inner circle of my world,
Mhm.
the people who really know me and love me, they know how invisible I feel.
Okay.
And
But
they know I'm not invisible.
the fire part does not know this invisible part, or has been unaware of it. Would it be all right with the fire part if you turn your attention just for a bit here to the invisible part?
Yeah. The invisible part is saying, wait a minute, but what if I like being invisible sometimes?
Well, yeah, we can, and we will assure the invisible part that we'll respect it if it wants to remain invisible. But right now, I just wanted to make sure that it was thoroughly good, or at least acceptable to the fire part, for you to really focus on the invisible part. just for a short while, so that, you know, both of them are brought present with you and with each other.
Okay, the invisible part gave me this really weird image of there's this character in the Ant-Man and the Wasp that is invisible, and she's a real badass, and she goes around beating everybody up, and nobody can see her because she's invisible, because she was in the quantum realm and all this and that, you know. So like my invisible, oh my God, I've never felt, the invisible part has always felt so weak and invisible, you know. It's like, no, she's going, no, 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 I got this, I got a badass part in me that's like that invisible villain that goes kicking ass and nobody can see her, so she gets away with it. So the invisible part is saying, huh, maybe it ain't so bad to be invisible. Sometimes you can get a lot done when people can't see what you're doing.
Okay, so how is the fire part with you in conversation with the invisible part?
The firefighter's going, I like that. I like that invisible part.
Okay.
It's going, okay, I'm not the only, it's almost like they're saying, okay, I'm not the only badass here. And I was like, all right, I got some.
All right, good. So does the invisible part hear that coming from the fire part?
Yeah, it likes taking in the power. It likes, but you know what? It's really weird now that I'm talking to it, myself is talking to it. And then now it's starting to become aware of the fire. The fire kind of is over here. The invisible part's kind of over there. And they're starting to realize that they're sharing power. It's like the fire isn't overpowering the invisible part, but they're like, they're both recognizing the power of each other. And the self is going, yeah. The self is going, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Julia, because we're doing a demo, I'm going to call it the end of the session and tell you that we're getting close to our time with in the inner world with these parts, so that we can prepare them and all the other parts in your system for you coming back out into your awareness of our circle. And what do they need and want so that they can stay in touch with you after doing this work? What does each one want? Maybe something different, or maybe the same.
One of the things that they're all asking for right now is they want to ceremonially sit around a fire and do like a collective mini unburdening, where they just take basically all the crap, like the extreme ways they've held the trauma they've felt, the trauma others have felt, the powerlessness, the, you know, all of the extreme, either, you know, being invisible or being targeted, all that. They just want to all be given just a minute, even, or, you know, I mean, 30 seconds. I mean, it's not time, it's just given that space to everybody pour their stuff into the fire and watch it go to the heavens.
Okay, so to watch the fire transform it quickly in the way that fire can do.
Yeah, it feels like they would be able to respect each other and work together better after, if they do that.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you take that 30 seconds or whatever they ask for in silence and witness them doing that, and then thank them and thank all the parts in your system. And after that silent ceremony in your inner world, just return to us and let us know when you're back. That'll work. All right.
They really appreciate that.
Okay, good. So part of an IFS demonstration is the debrief. And the way that I like to do it, of course, there are many ways to do most everything, is to turn to the person who did the inner work with a few debrief inquiries, and then turn to those who were witnessing after that. So I see you nodding your head, Julia.
So you want me to come back?
I'd like to,
Come
I'd like
back.
to just, yeah, welcome you back and just ask you what was this like for you?
Surprising.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, it was healing. I feel like a greater sense of calm in my system. I feel there's a greater sense of knowing, um, of mutual respect among my parts. Um, myself feels more revealed um, to my parts. So it's that feeling of being both, I feel more formed and yet also more spacious. Um, so there's more of a there, but there's also a sense of spaciousness. So yeah.
So do you have any concerns about the way it all went?
No, because I was worried. I think my worry beforehand was that I have storyteller parts that want to go into all that. Well, this happened and that happened and they did that and I did that and I said that. And, they didn't show up. So I'm really glad.
Mhm. So anything else that worked well that you just want to name before we move into what this was like for other people who gave their compassionate witness?
I just have a sense that I don't think I could have done what we just did if my ancestors, including my parents, were not present.
Mhm.
And I also have a sense that my being willing to do this will plant seeds. I say that humbly and gratefully. I'm listening to a song lately called Trees Will Never See. And the chorus talks about we're planting seeds of trees we'll never see. I think that's what we just did. And it makes me love you and appreciate you. And I also believe that it wouldn't have been possible without the self energy of those watching, being present here in this right now. That those present who came and who witnessed are part of it.
Thank
So
you.
that's
Thank you, Julia. And if you want to go get water or move around or whatever, um, uh, I think that we'll just take some time and listen here because of where we are with our 2-hour webinar.
well, I
So,
think given the 2 hours, I just power through. As long I'll probably mute myself when I blow my nose, but other than that, I'll just stay present. I'm okay. I have my tea right here.
okay, that's fine. Thank you. So now, if we could have the gallery view back, please, Parker. At least maybe I need to change that for myself. And Keave, could I ask you to come forward here, please? Where are you? Where's that green light around your rectangle? There you are. Thank you. Keave, I'm going to ask some people to comment if they like. And then after that, would you read a little bit of what people are thinking, feeling from the chat before we go further? Okay, thank you. So, all right. We'll take a couple or three people who would like to express to our circle, what was this like for you? And you can either raise your hand or raise your Zoom hand. And it doesn't have to be anything long, just a feeling or a thought. What was this like to be part of this IFS demo? There, I see a hand, and that would be it. How do you pronounce your name, your first name? Jaya?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being willing to share what this was like for you.
Yes. My name is Jaya Garcia. I'm a direct descendant of the White Mountain Apache tribe, and I work for United Indians of All Tribes. I think it's given me a sense of self, a sense of creating a safe place for myself and seeing it in others, how they come in contact with them innerly and having feelings and expressing in an open way. It helps me understand that it's okay to communicate and to rely on others and how to support each other as well. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaya. It's a beautiful thing to be able to have others witness, because we heal, we learn from others' stories and others' inner work. Thank you so much. Another hand. I'm looking.
Keave, did you want to speak? I saw your square go green, and then it
Yeah,
there it is.
Keave is going to read a little bit for us, but before you do that, Keave, I wonder if someone else has a comment about what this was like for you. Sometimes it just takes a minute to pull ourselves back. Oh, there's Adonica. Did I pronounce your name right?
Donica, yes.
Thank you for being willing to let us know what it was like for you.
In the beginning, it was really uncomfortable because I felt like, I don't know, it almost felt like you interrupted her when she was kind of starting to really begin to go. And I just like, part of me was like, ooh, I'm like, let her go. Let her speak her truth, especially if it's gonna speak up. Give her the room to do so. It may not look pretty, and this may be this whatever demo, but I'm just like, that part of me was like, let her go, But seeing her react the way she did, I think, my parts were reacting as well, the rage. I think the majority of us natives, we have that. We have that rage. We have that, that she says that it comes from the earth. To me, I'm like, oh, I know what that is, and it's interesting. And I think I was uncomfortable, but at the same time comfortable. Like, man, I'm so glad she's saying that. But part of me is like, geez, that's like a slap in the face, if when you're native and you get it, you get it. So it's like, and so, yeah, it kind of brought up a lot in me, as far as my part, if you will. responding, like wanting to kind of jump on board and help her. Like, you know, like, I get it, you know, and, you know, it's almost like I wanted her to scream at the top of her lungs is the feeling I got. Like, let go, girl, just let it go. Feel it to the top of your head, to the tip of your toes, you know, whatever. Because I think that this internalized oppression that you had been talking about previously, you know, the shame and the oppressive, and even what we do with each other as Native, the teasing, you know, that teasing has a foundation in internalized oppression, because the teasing has a passive aggressive shame factor to it. The teasing has a passive aggressive control factor to it. And so, you know, I feel like there's just a lot going on. I'm sorry, but I just had to tell you, thank you, Julia, because it really demonstrated, you know, the capabilities of this modality, you know, to free some of the stuff that Natives haven't been allowed to verbalize. They haven't been allowed to be, there's no words given to it that are acceptable by the white race. You know, but now it's like, okay, you know, now we're making space, you know, and granted it's within a it's within a modality, but still it's, you know, there you can see some Native influences in it. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Adanka. I love it that you're here today. No need to apologize for anything that you said. I really want to thank you for bringing up and speaking for your parts about noticing something that made you uncomfortable in the beginning and that was possibly part of my therapist parts. And, you know, I mentioned I've been doing this for years, and I still have a polarity of parts that some of them say, just let a person speak until they're done. And then another part or coalition of parts that says, we need to slow this down. And especially if we're going to do a demo, and that we need to, I need to come in as the person who is holding some of this. So thank you so much for noticing that and having the courage to speak up about it. And with the model, we just learn to follow a trailhead and stay in our self energy. And every therapist is going to do it a little bit differently. So I appreciate that you also spoke about having a lot come up, a lot that comes up that is felt in a Native population here. Just, I appreciate what you said and that you were willing to speak to it. Thank you, Adanka.
I'd like to comment if I could on that, because from my perspective as the client, I did feel that you were kind of containing me a little bit more than we would if we had, like, for example, when I do my IFS work, I only work in 90-minute sessions. I won't work in, well, I have, but when people call me, that's how I work, because I want spacious amounts of time. And so I felt a little bit reined in, and at the same time, though it was a little, you know, a little bit reined in, which my parts typically don't like, I then appreciated it, because I feel like I have a really complex system that can get really intense. And so it's almost like you pulled me a little bit from the brink, you know, from going over the edge. And so, but I trusted you because we have an existing, trusting, loving relationship. I knew that you weren't judging me. I didn't feel judged. And so I felt like, no, if these parts got something to say, girl, they're going to say it. So, you know, they said it. I don't feel in the end, I didn't feel that any part didn't say what it wanted to say.
Okay. Thank
So,
you
yeah.
so much, Julia, for speaking for those parts that did feel a little reined in, and for your other self energy or your other parts that said, oh no, let's go with this. And I see that Adonica wants to be in a conversation here. So please go ahead again. Or is that just that your hand didn't come down?
My hand didn't come down. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you. All right. So we have time for one more comment before we come back to Keave, and then Keave, will you also close us with prayer?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And we'll go on in time if we have to and stay beyond let those who can stay, but we'll try to finish by 2. Okay, is one more person would like to speak for what it was like for you to be part of this demo?
How
All right.
nice.
Who is this?
Yeah, so this is Jason. Aloha. I'm from Hawaii, but I'm actually here in Seattle for another training. But I know my camera's not working too well. I'm sorry about that.
No
But I
worries.
do want to say mahalo. Mahalo, thank you for what was said, was shared, because as a Native person, I understand the vulnerability and then also the part that we cannot speak up sometimes. So, you know, when as a client or as the therapist, for to be on both sides of the table or on the counter, the chair, whatever it is, sometimes as a counselor myself, I would feel vulnerable too, because it's going to bring up my trauma or my personal views of things. And so then I have to contain myself too, right? And then that's where the balance is. That's where it's beautiful, when you know that you're there to be of support for someone, and that you can understand them even more because you've gone it through yourself. And I'm speaking on behalf of all my ancestors, my ohana, my family, because my grandma grew up in a time where she couldn't even speak her language, you know, the Hawaiian language. So to be able to share that and speak it to them, it's a beautiful thing that we can carry the traditions and the love of our ancestors. I'm sorry, getting emotional too. But thank you, mahalo, because and for all that shared, we're on that same boat with you, that same canoe, we're paddling together. We are battling the same health disparities, the same problems we faced as Caucasian people took our land, took our culture, took our people. To understand all of that and to be able to stand up tall and still carry on. So I really truly appreciated everything that was shared. I came in a little late, but I felt from the moment I came on that I could feel the connection and have a deeper understanding and see that rage, and then also have to be, hey, this is not my battle right now. But you know, it's something that I felt. So thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. And I feel like I can say mahalo better than I can say your name. And thank you so much for your comments and input. So, Keave.
Mahalo nui, Jason. And I do love this process. I just wanted to speak to that, you know, of ho'oponopono, the relationship that we have, and how everyone is valued in that respect and appreciation. Bringing it back to those 3 things that Susan had mentioned to all of our parts, and I just wanted to reach out to my lineage and my ancestry to, you know, Jason had spoke before, and just mahalo nui. So thank you and aloha. But I'm ready if you are, Susan.
Yes, let's close. I hope everyone got a chance to read what it was like for others in the chat. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Keave, for your teaching today and for closing us with your prayer.
Oh, I was wondering if before we do a closing prayer, I'd like to say one more thing about, and it was in response to one of the comments, which is wanting to jump in as a therapist or a helper, because we're wanting to train lay people in this as well. So you want to jump in when it's your partner, your child, your friend, your whatever. And so I remember when I was learning IFS for the first time, and I was at the conference, and Dick Schwartz was there, the creator of IFS, doing a demo. And at the end, we're asking all these questions like, why did you say this? And why didn't you say that? And why did you call that? And why did you not this? And then I raised my hand and I said, you know, everybody's talking about what you said, but what I noticed was your silence. How did you wait so long? Because I said, I was watching you and it was quiet for long periods of time. And I was watching going, I would have jumped in. I would have jumped in. I would have jumped in. And I go, how did you wait? And he goes, Julia, the most important thing for you to learn is when you're in self and when you're in a part. Because the parts that want to jump in are usually a part. It's not self. Self can wait. Self allows it to happen, doesn't make it happen. And so anyway, I just want to say that for those of you here, those of you listening to the recording, the best thing you can do immediately is to begin to notice, when are you in self and when are you in a part, and to develop that capacity to hold space from self. So that's all. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia, for volunteering to do this demo. Thank you. It's wonderful to work with you. And thanks everybody for staying over time. Teave.
If you all will just give me one moment, and if you can, I'd like to bring you this prayer in the language that I know best to pray in, which is Cherokee. Oge do dang kalala de he kalak kwe says to de to do he to go via he we're gonna go here hard near low he task us over kalasta tea Zagodeli holds out the tuggy skewed lagis keshiko skinner we yo nanagas nego ha alone he to go via no it lay Zatlan a day years it lay Jetla walk I go here that him in ski war. Oh, thank you all.
Did everyone see the note from Parker to please fill out the survey before you leave? I think you'll get it via email, and thank you for participating in that way by filling it out as well. And Alberta, if you're still here, I see in the chat your request. I'm making a note of it, and we'll speak with Steve about it. And Parker, you also see this, that from Alberta, that she would like her prayer deleted from the recording. I understand that and support that. Thanks for letting us know, Alberta, if you're still here.
And Parker, the recording is going to be on the website, right? When they get the link, all the participants will get a link.
Yeah, it'll be on the website, and on the YouTube channel. We'll have to edit it first, so it'll probably be a bit longer than that. But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.